then I get to the counter and I go reach for the brush and went, I don't need that anymore either. It's like, it was at the right time. So I'm glad when I was standing there brushing my teeth, I noticed this, like, it's like a black line, like that's just not attached. Like, and it wasn't there, but it was just the Sesame Street, which one doesn't look like all the rest of them. And I think, if I wouldn't have noticed in that, 30-second to 2-minute window, I would have been, and I would look in the mirror like, what's wrong? Something's off. Because I would have just missed that milestone in the moment piece. But
Yeah.
with a toothbrush hanging out of my mouth, I text the woman who does my straight razor, shave, and beard trim. My normal Tuesday is this Tuesday, so you make the appointment longer, please. Tell me if I come earlier or stay later or reschedule, but it's all coming off. Time to molt. So it feels great. It just feels wonderful, actually. Which I like.
often, women, we know, many of us know, when we make a big change in hair, it's usually quite a significant change in our lives. It's another chapter, really.
It's actually been a 3-month molting. It started with the hat, and there was no intellectual anything. It's just like brain spotting or releasing a trauma. It's like, okay, it's gone later. You don't need to sit there and rationalize, explain, rehydrate it by reproving or explain. It's gone. It's in the living in the now. And just that 3 months ago, walking out the door, I look over and I see my hat, and all I say is, and I keep walking. 2 weeks later is when I brushing my teeth and noticed the beard. And so it's like the hat, the beard, the hair, and then not spending so much time at my table. And I realized
Interesting.
that it's so much what I'm in service to and what I do, that if no one even sits down, I'm in a Zen sit for 8 to 10 hours. If people sit down, it doesn't even change. It's just what I do. Because as I start to walk home, and I, pardon me, started to walk home, it's only a third of a mile, because after about 50 feet, all of a sudden this energy comes up, because I'm no longer in the Zen sit, but it's an active meditation. And it's interesting because if I left at 10:30 and didn't consciously just breathe, exhale, big breaths on the way home, I'd be up till 3 or 4 in the morning, because it was like going to the nitrous oxide gas station. But, but what I realized, though, with a dear friend of mine, I said something, and it was kind of reading between the lines from something she said. And she looked at me and she said, "Don't do that with me." And I stopped and I went, oh my God, occupational hazard. I didn't leave the table. I'm so used to, that's all. I go to the table, I go out to eat, I come home. I've been in solitude for quite a while. So it was just, but when she said, "Don't do that with me," I went, oh, right. Bad occupational hazard. Okay, what you say is what I get. That's called connection, not what you say and I start reading around, whatever. That's all projection and what I may hope, wish, worry, whatever. But it all of a sudden, the big part of this whole 3 months was what's present, period. If it's direct and it's real, that's all I need. And so it started to get me out of my head. And there was a point where I started in some groups talking way too much again. And I think what it was I was enthusiastic and excited, but then that's at the expense of the connection of others. So the big milestone, I think, is my intensity increasing by becoming more of a caldera kind of calm, instead of, I can't say manic, because I've never had that really, but it's, when I get moving, it's kind of zipping around the racetrack.
Yeah.
So,
more bubbling brook.
Yeah, exactly. So I really resonate when you said, when women make a big change, especially with hair. And I've always had what I call Samson.
Okay, so syndrome.
So, are you on?
I'm performing you're not hearing me.
Yes, we are.
Are you live yet, or we could hear you?
Yeah.
We hear you.
You're hearing me, but I'm not. Are you hearing me directly?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I guess it's all
Is your
right
volume?
then. I'm experimenting with my new iPods.
Oh.
And my problem is that if I do this, that I'm just a minute. I have to do something with my sound here.
I appreciate you said that, Judith, though, the big change with the hair, because honestly, that was that indicator. And then I didn't have to go, oh, here's a rite of passage and be concerned. It's like, no. None of that this time. I'm 55 years old. It's a matter of, I just switched psychological gears. And
yes,
I started, honestly, the big thing, noticing my non-exhaustive yawns, because those are typically an indicator physically of psychological change of state and gear shifting. And I've always had that kind of manually, but now it's more of an automatic kind of thing. So when I notice it, I feel this, oh, and I'm not just staying on one spot. There's more of a rhythm that's occurring. So more oceanic, but like you said, bubbling brook, because it's right here. It's not like vast,
right.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
You know what?
Yeah.
In Buddhism, we say it's the mandala that's always complete and never arranged. You can't arrange things to happen, Jordan, but you can make yourself more open to them, to the journey.
Yes.
Which is what I feel you've done. You do. We do.
Thank you. Yeah, we do. And to me, my 5 favorite words, the always complete, comma, never finished, comma, lifelong, period. When I say those, I get tingles in my belly, my gut now, because it's not just, yes, that's true. It doesn't need any words.
Yeah.
So,
okay. I have to interrupt the lovely discussion because we're 30 minutes into our session and we haven't gotten started.
Good. We're ready.
I just found that the iPods are not working for me because they're playing back the YouTube sound as well as your direct sound. So I'm hearing double, and the only way I can do that is here I have my computer headset, which plays the YouTube sound, but I don't listen to it. And so I can hear it through my microphone. So apologies, everyone, but I wanted to talk to you today in part about this book, new book, The Shadow and the Problem of Evil, 5 examinations. It's edited by Murray Stein, and it has an excellent article about the problem of evil in it, and it also has an excellent conversation between Murray Stein and Henry Abramovich, who we've worked with for years now, and both of them are very good. I wish all of our pundits would read this book and start to understand this, and I'm going to push them that way, starting maybe just at the beginning of the new year, because Colleen Kibert has written an excellent chapter about the shadow in her new book, which is going to be coming out next year. And she's just finishing up the book. So I'm hopeful to start promoting it, and also to have that excellent chapter on the shadow available so that I can send it to all the usual suspects on the television. Fundamentally,
Skip, have you ever gotten anything back from David Brooks?
no.
Uh-huh.
Did I write to him?
Well, I think he'd be a good candidate.
Okay, I don't know who he is.
He's not conservative. He's not liberal. He just wrote a book. He's written many books on the subject of our culture. He does write for the New York Times.
Uh-huh. And do you have his email address by any chance?
I think I do. I'll send it to you.
Okay, that'll be great.
Look at him. I think you'd appreciate his
okay.
His bandwidth. He's got a wide bandwidth.
Yeah. Well, what I'm impressed by is I was, Rachel Maddow has a new book out called Prequel, which is an excellent book. And it basically shows us the Nazi tendencies of the American psyche, the collective unconscious, going back to the early 1930s, even before that, maybe. And there was, Charles Lindbergh got swept up into it. There was a famous preacher, I think he was a Catholic priest named Father Coughlin, who in 1940 had the largest radio audience in the world. And he was preaching Nazi philosophy at that time. And she tells the story in her book Prequel. Well, I heard her and Chris, what's his name? The guy who has All In with Chris Hayes. Is it Chris Hayes? I think it's Chris Hayes. Anyway, Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow have been doing this book tour across the country, live auditorium presentations. And so the other night, Friday night on MSNBC, they showed this book tour video that was done at Town Hall in New York City twice. They showed it from, I guess, 7 to 9 and then 9 to 11. And what impressed me about this, their commentary was they are totally clueless about the shadow. And they haven't really connected that stuff up at all in their discussion. And that's true of all the talking heads. And so it's time that we started to discuss it and get it out in the general discussion in our society, because we have to learn about it. And what Mary Stein talks about in this book is the fact that there are stages of shadow in psychological development, and I'm experiencing this in my school experience, where these 12 to 15-year-old, mostly boys, are constantly fighting. They're in this constant battle, and it's Stein describes it as kind of the Cain and Abel story, and it's a primal condition. And the way out of that stage is maturity, because young boys do fight. Now, I didn't fight with my brother when I was 12 to 15, or anyone when I was 12 to 15, but I do remember fighting with my brother when I was 5 or 6. I remember that very well. And we grew out of it, fortunately. But anyway, it's a stage of psychological development, and I'm seeing it as a stage of the collective unconscious. And in terms of how Murray has described it, he's described it as a stage of consciousness, but I I see it as a stage of maturity that, you know, when you get it to a certain maturity, you're going to stop fighting with your brother. And the problem is that we're, for the most part, a lot of people around the world are still at this primal stage and haven't matured beyond it. And maybe if we talk about it, we can start to mature beyond it. I don't know.
Well, I would tend to agree, because I think there's a resonance of tempering like a sword. You take it hot from the forge into the cleanest, coldest water, and then you get the sizzle. But if you hear it cracks. And so what happens, I think those internal confusions that of trying to grok the world around you. I didn't fight as much as a kid. You know, I learned more as a teenager, martially. But it's a kind of thing where I think that inner civil wars that are taken out outside on people, it's one of those, if you don't heal what hurts you, you're going to bleed on people who didn't. And I think that's important, because like you said, you grow out of them, I think, by growing into temperance, which is not becoming boring or status quo. It's becoming comfortable with your intensities.
Right. And you know, obviously we have a national neurosis in our collective unconscious today, and Jung's solution to solving neurosis is to grow out of it. You don't make it go away. You only, you know, put a circle around it and put it over in the corner and say, yeah, that's there, but we've gone beyond that. And
that, or also it's like a seed husk that you crack it open and emerge from it, and it goes away in the same way. It's just a shell on the beach.
Yeah. Okay, now there are a couple of comments here on YouTube that need to be addressed. Yay HB says, can you hear me? No, we cannot hear you. We can read you on the YouTube chat, and you can join our panel, but you have to do that through the MailChimp list. And Jace, yes, we see you, and let's see, and Morningstar is here, so anyway, okay, I'm going to put the MailChimp on in a while on this YouTube chat when I get a chance, but I think that we should begin, and we're talking about the Red Book by C.G. Jung, the Reader's Edition. We're on the 6th discussion of the section of it called The Magician, which is it's a very long section, but it's the last section in Liber Secundus. And so we are right at the bottom of page 428 in the Reader's Edition. Jordan, if you will read, I will go get the link for the YouTube audience.
Got it. Starting with image 169, H1 171.
Right.
I set foot on new land. Nothing brought up should flow back. No one shall tear down what I have built. My tower is of iron and has no seams. The devil is forged into the foundations. The Kabiri built it, and the master builders were sacrificed with the sword on the battlements of the tower. Just as a tower surmounts the summit of a mountain on which it stands, so I stand above my brain from which I grew. I have become hard and cannot be undone again. No more do I flow back. I am the master of my own self. I admire the mastery. I am strong and beautiful and rich. The vast lands and the blue sky have laid themselves before me and bowed to my mastery. I wait upon no one, and no one waits upon me. I serve myself, and I myself serve. Therefore, I have what I need. My tower grew for several thousand years, imperishable. It does not sink back, but it can be built over and will be built over. Few grasp my tower, since it stands on a high mountain, but many will see it and not grasp it. Therefore, my tower will remain unused. No one scales its smooth walls. No one lands on its pointed roof. Only he who finds the entrance hidden in the mountain and rises up through the labyrinths of the innards can reach the tower. And the happiness of he who surveys things from there and he who lives from himself. This has been attained and created. It is not arisen from a patchwork of human thoughts, but has been forged from the glowing heat of the innards. The Kabiri themselves carried the matter to the mountain and consecrated the building with their own blood as the sole keepers of the mystery of its genesis. I built it out of the lower and upper beyond, and not from the surface of the world. Therefore, it is new and strange and towers over the plains inhabited by humans. This is the solid and the beginning. And then the footnote there, 315. In Psychological Types, Jung commented on the symbolism of the tower in his discussion of the vision of the tower in The Shepherd of Hermas, Collected Works 8, in 1920. In 1920, Jung began planning his tower at Bollingen, which was a new addition to the house already built.
Right. And so what Jung is talking about here is that, our attitudes and, everything about us has been building up for thousands of years. It's not something new. It's not something that you learn from your parents. It's something that is deeply ingrained within us, all human beings. And Jung, as Mary Stein points out in this book, The Shadow and the Problem of Evil, which has just come out on Chiron, by the way, edited by Mary Stein. He believes that evil is archetypal, and therefore it is not escapable. It's we have to recognize first that we have evil within us, and then we have to try to stay ahead of it. And if you put yourself, just for an imaginative purpose, put yourself in any dire situation, like being in jail, like this Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd on national television. He's in prison now, and he was attacked with a knife. He was stabbed in prison, and so that wasn't part of his penalty from the law, but things catch up to you. And we've put a lot of black men into incarceration, and so if you're white and you've killed a black man, wow, look out. You better pray for
I have a question about the tower. The tower has been coming up for me a lot in my symbols. So I have been encountering a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses. I have a personal, I guess, story or connection to the Twin Towers. I have, so one of the things in the brochure for the Jehovah's Witness, it says something about like Watchtower Press or whatever. And, when I think of that, I think about the Lord of the Rings, but my precious, but, in terms of Jehovah's Witnesses, when I did some in-depth research, I found a lot of stuff that just does not make sense to me even more. And it just confused me. But the point is, they talk about the watchtower. So what is this tower? What is this obsession with tower? Because the tower is pretty much a very important symbol for extremists and for radicals at this point, I guess. So what is this tower situation? All J.R.R. Tolkien aside or inside.
Tower is a metaphor for building up the structure of your life and your understanding of life. And you know, Jung, this building behind me in this image, built his tower at Bollingen. It took him 16 years to do it. And he built it by hand because he wanted to create a physical representation of what he was going through. And actually, you know, the family still has not allowed the public to enter this place because apparently there are a lot of images and so on in Bollingen that I guess the family has decided the world isn't ready for yet. And maybe some of those images relate to evil, this question of evil that we're now having to face. And in her presentation at Town Hall, Rachel Maddow made the comment with which I agree, that not all generations are called upon to deal with this force, this power, but we are called upon to face it now. We living human beings now, and you know, it came up once before during Hitler's time, and you know, there was a statistic in this book that 89% of the American public did not want to go to war in World War II. And it was only when Pearl Harbor happened that Roosevelt could bring Americans around to getting into the war, because the war had actually been going for over 2 years before we entered World War II. You know, the World War II began September 1st, 1939, not when it began for Americans, December 7th, 41. And so, you know, there was a lot of stuff sloshing back and forth. I mean, the Marine Corps named the base for the 3rd Marine Division Camp Smedley Butler because Smedley Butler was a Marine in the post-World War I, in World War I and the post-World War I era, and he was asked by this cabal that included Charles Lindbergh and others to literally rebel against the United States, using the Marine Corps as a instrument for that, and he refused. And so he, you know, that's how he became immortalized. That's why his name is on the Marine base, because he stood up to this power of evil that was sloshing about in the American psyche at that time. And you know, Rachel correctly in her book Prequel, you know, identifies this phenomenon that was occurring in the American psyche in that time, but she hasn't been exposed, I don't think, to Jungian psychology, so she doesn't understand that this is actually has been covered by Jungian psychology for a century now, and it's something that we have to get out in the public.
You know, I find what's interesting about that, especially in regards to the shadow. I haven't seen the Game of Thrones, but there was a really wonderful scene I saw last night and there's one of Queen's prominent counsel, and he comes up, he goes, I've learned a secret. Knowledge is power. And she looks at him and she says, she leans in and then she leans back. She said, seize him. And the 3 guards grab him, cut his throat. And right before they do, she said, oh, stop. And she laughs. I changed my mind. Now take 3 steps back and turn around and close your eyes. And then she walks up to him and she said, knowledge is not power. Power is power. And what's interesting is the whole way she did that. Yeah, you can know things, but the commanding them into being is quite a different thing. And I think in that regard, setting up this visual, everyone's talking about tower. What about the tower at Temple Quinta Regulera? This is an inverted tower that's an initiation well that goes into the ground.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't even know it's there. So I think what's interesting is if you're walking across the grass, you wouldn't know. And then you look down and you can travel the spiral down to the well at the bottom. The thing is, there's what is the masterful command of the obvious? What's your topic? What do you see? Also now, what surrounds it and what is its capital O other? And so I think when we don't just look at, oh, look at the male tower. Well, what about the air all around it? There's the positive negative space, and making sure something is in context instead of beating its chest with a, basically hubris kind of power, which is just juvenile.
Yeah. So I want to correct or make a comment about something that Richard has said here. Richard has said, evil is a choice, a conscious decision. Either you hug your crucifix to feel close to God, or you dance around it and think, look, I have to get that to move up because think, look what I'm getting away with, that God doesn't see me. And Richard, that represents a fundamental misunderstanding of Jungian psychology, because Jung's position was that evil is archetypal, that it is a part of God, not a separate entity. It's not an either God or the devil, both of which are outside us, but both of those entities are within us. And so
actually, Kathy, do you have your water on?
I have a kettle that's getting ready to boil. Let me mute.
Yeah, okay. And Kathy, the answer to your question is that Jordan is quite honored by having received the water bearer, but has not yet gone to UPS to actually get it.
I have plumbing to deal with at a friend's house, and it's really cold. And no. Okay. My schedule.
All right. So you got to Jordan,
I got to. This is the solid and the beginning.
Yeah. So you got, okay. So the next section is, I've united with the serpent of the beyond. I have accepted everything beyond into myself. From this I have built my beginning. When this work was completed, I was pleased, and I felt curious to know what might still lie in my beyond. So I approached my serpent and asked her amiably whether she would not like to creep over to bring me news of what was happening in the beyond. But the serpent was weary and said that she had no liking for this. Okay, now remember the image, which is an ancient image that Jung adopted, was the baby holding the 2 snakes. Okay, and the point is about that, and this is the point, Richard, about what I said to you, is that this two snakes, which also appear in the caduceus, going back and forth, and the caduceus representing the profession of medicine. Sometimes medicines are poison to us, and sometimes they are healing, right? And so that's the point, and it's been in human consciousness for thousands of years, because the caduceus is a symbol that goes back that long, 2,000 years or more. And so the point is that the opposites, those two opposites, unite within us. We are the midpoint, and it's we that has to make sense of it. Just like the medical profession has to make sense of every, little piece of mineral that they put into pills, and then determine by trial and error whether it's poisonous to us or whether it's efficacious. That's our dilemma for everything. That's where we are. We are ending this period of Pisces, the two fish, and we're going into this age of Aquarius, where we can see what Jung was talking about, that the baby holding the two serpents is a symbol for the fact that it is our responsibility in our psyche to unite those opposites. That's what we are about. And did you want to comment on this, Judith? Because
well, that is individuation, which Jung and in psychotherapy we also call an enlightened, waking up. And I think waking up the dark and honoring the brilliant sanity that is also always present. Right. So I'm so appreciative of this perspective, because anything we can bring awareness to and feels like it is an experiential part of us, we can work with. When it's just abstract and mental, oh, the evil in the world, we can't work with it. But right here, we can
work with it. That is
amen. Amen to that, Judith. I agree.
Yeah, and Kathy, in answer to your question, yes, you may read today, by all means. And so you can please begin at the paragraph that says "for I," and it has the footnote 316, which is February 2nd, 1914. And I keep emphasizing this, that the whole Red Book, everything that we've read before, okay, which is that much, everything we've read before was written by Carl Jung, with the exception of a very small amount, between Christmas 1913 and this date. Now we're up to this point after a couple of years of doing this work, and we're only at February 2nd of 1914, and it's still before World War I.
I think before Kathy begins to speak to what Judith just said, because that was, yes, a big amen, and what it sparked in me was Asclepius symbol and Hygeia symbol, and Asclepius is the father, medicine. Hygeia is the daughter, well-being. But in medicine, there's this scientific closed system, unself-aware. The line drawn through the middle is the intellect and the meridian, but it is encased in the vessel of the top and the bottom. Whereas Hygeia, in here, the vessel becomes a vessel, and she is self-aware and circumambulating around it. So she is living the vessel, or this is cogitating the vessel. So there's inhabiting the vessel, there's living the vessel. And I think that's an important, just even in the symbol, the stories that these two tell. This is a seed, this is the acorn, this is the oak tree. So the Hygeia comes out.
I think it would be fair enough to refer to evil in this way too, that the solution to
Mhm.
evil
Yes.
is not to make a choice, because then you're choosing one thing over another thing, and it's like if we allow the Civil War of the United States to go on, what will happen? I mean, we even in the first Civil War would have caused a catastrophe, but at least then there were states that were one way or the other. But today we're everywhere. Both points of view are everywhere. So there's, we can't have a civil war that divides up the United States, because who would do it, even if
That's so scary.
that is scary. Yeah.
Very scary.
How would it be?
I don't even want to think about it.
Right.
But I'm waiting for Jung to, I don't know if Jung mentions the Romanov sisters, because I think that happens like about 4 years later, their execution. And it's so weird because this morning I had a dream about the Romanov sisters, and it was very like from that TV show American Horror Story-esque.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this sort of like reptilian vision and traveling dimensions and all this alchemy and stuff. It was a very intense dream, and thank goodness Aphrodite, my Pisces cat, woke me up. So more reason for her to be a diva that it's Pisces season. But I mean, I don't know if he's gonna talk about the Romanov sisters. I don't think it has any relation with him.
He certainly does not talk about them in the Red Book. And
they were the Princess Dianas of his time.
Right. And I don't recall him ever mentioning the Romanovs, but I'm not saying he didn't, but I just don't recall any direct reference to them, because he was so steeped in the Bible. He was trying to talk about Christianity without getting himself burned at the stake.
Political.
Yeah. And
I don't want to cut you off. I have to come back in a bit, but I just wanted to say one more thing, which was the weird thing is that, because we were talking about the evil again, is that the Russian Revolution was this sort of like a liberation from the czars, but at the same time, the way that they accomplished this was by creating a mob to storm into a home of a czar family. And I mean, I don't understand the symbolism of attacking daughters. I'm not sure if they also attacked sons too of czar families, but it's just very interesting, the feminine.
But there was a son. I mean, Alexei, he was shot with the whole family and all of their servants that were still with them, in their house of destiny, their place of destiny. Yeah. So he was the heir, and he was absolutely assassinated as well.
That was my recollection, that the whole family went. And so in any case, are you good to go, Kathy, or?
Yes. Am I starting at the top of page 430?
The second paragraph there. I don't want to force anything.
I don't want to force anything, but perhaps, who knows, we will still find out something useful. For a while, the serpent hesitated. Then she disappeared into the depths. Soon I heard her voice. I believe that I have reached hell. There is a hanged man here. A plain, ugly man with a contorted face stands before me. He has protruding ears and a hunchback. He said, I am a prisoner who is condemned.
No, I am a poisoner.
A poisoner, thank you. I am a poisoner who is condemned to the rope. I. What did you do? He. I poisoned my parents and my wife. I. Why did you do that? He. To honor God. I, what? To honor God? What do you mean by that? He, first of all, everything that happens is for the honor of God. And secondly, I had my own ideas. I, what went through your mind? He, I loved them and wanted to transport them more quickly from a wretched life into eternal blessedness. I gave them too strong a nightcap. I, and did this not lead you to find out what your own interest in this was? He, I was now alone and very unhappy. I wanted to live for the sake of my 2 children, for whom I foresaw a better future. I was in better health than my wife, so I wanted to live. I, did your wife agree to the murders? He, no, she certainly would have consented, but she knew nothing of my intentions. Unfortunately, the murder was discovered and I was condemned to death. I, have you found your relatives again in the beyond? He, well, that's a strange and unlikely story. I suspect that I'm in hell. Sometimes it seems as if my wife were here too, and sometimes I'm not sure, just as little as I'm sure of my own self. I, what is it like? Tell me. He, from time to time, she seems to speak to me and I reply, but we haven't spoken about either the murder of our children until now. We only speak together here and there, and only about trivial things, small matters from our earlier daily life, but completely impersonal, as if we no longer had anything to do with each other. But the true nature of things eludes me. I see even less of my parents. I believe that I have yet to meet my mother. My father was here once and said something about his tobacco pipe, which he had lost somewhere. I, but how do you pass your time? He, I believe there is no time with us, so there is none to spend. Nothing at all happens. I, isn't that extremely boring? He, boring? I've never thought about it like that. Boring? Perhaps, but there's nothing interesting. In actual fact, it's pretty much all the same. I, doesn't the devil ever torment you? He, the devil? I've seen nothing of him. I, you come from the beyond, and yet you have nothing to report? I find that hard to believe. He, when I still had a body, I often thought that surely it would be interesting to speak to one of the revenants. But now the prospect means nothing to me, nothing much to me. As I said, everything here is impersonal and purely matter of fact. As far as I know, that's what they say. I, that is bleak. I assume that you are in the deepest hell. He, I don't care. I guess I can go now, can't I? Farewell. Suddenly he vanished, but I turned to the serpent and said, what should this boring guest from the beyond mean? S. I met him over there, stumbling around restlessly, like so many others. I chose him as the next best. He strikes me as a good example. I, but is the beyond so colorless? S. It seems so. There is nothing but motion when I make my way over there. Everything merely surges back and forth in a shadowy way. There is nothing personal whatsoever. I, what is it then that this damned personal, what is it then with this damned personal quality? Satan recently made a strong impression on me as if I were the quintessence of the personal. S. Of course he would, since he is the eternal adversary and because you can never reconcile personal life with absolute life. I. Can't one unite these opposites? S. They are not opposites, but simply differences, just as little as you make the day the opposite of the year or the bushel the opposite of the cubit. I. That's enlightening, but somewhat boring. S. As always, when one speaks of the beyond, it goes on withering away, particularly since we have balanced the opposites and married. I believe the dead will soon become extinct.
That's a statement.
Yeah. You want to
So
comment
that
on
means
that?
everlasting life. That means everlasting life.
Right.
I love it that hell sounds so boring. I mean, what's the motivation for being naughty if hell's just one big boring day after day after day? Boring.
Right.
No
There's the old
individual,
joke.
nothing personal. So there's no individualization. There's no, it's all the blurring of all the lines. Like you're all just in a big old health stew. And
and
yeah,
no
you can
time passes.
Well, and there's the old engineering joke that Satan made the mistake of too many engineers went to hell, and now they have central air and heating. Or Oscar Wilde, I don't want to go to heaven. None of my friends are there.
Or the t-shirt that I have. I hope they serve tacos in hell.
There you go. I believe in the text, though, that when it says, "I believe the dead will soon become extinct," there's a illusion to everlasting life. So the Ankh, because the dead becoming extinct, well, how would that occur? Well, there would be no death.
It's the denial of death. Yeah.
The problem is it's also denial of life because there's no creativity, because creativity requires the fecund corrosion and things that have gone before to nourish the whole cycle of life. So in a sense, if the dead will soon become extinct, that's the end of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no life, there's no death,
anyway.
Destruction, none of it.
Yeah, I saw an interesting thing from NASA recently that was talking about aliens a couple days ago, and it says, yeah, there may be aliens and millions of alien cultures, but what we know as of today is still consistent with the idea that we're alone. And that's, in a way, that's frightening too.
Well, and Carl Sagan said, if there's no other life in the universe, what a terrible waste of space.
Sure. And but as of now, we know of no other life in the universe. And I have two dear friends that work for NASA, and they're both exobiologists.
Oh, you froze at exobiologist. So looking for life outside of here.
Was
Skip, we lost you right after you said you had two friends that are exobiologists and you froze.
Okay, so they're exobiologists in NASA, and my wife asked the woman what would make your career fulfilled, and her answer was finding one microbe that did not originate on Earth. Because it would prove that there is life beyond. Would be the what that would be the sort of atomic moment of this, if they actually could find anything like that.
Well, and the biological etymology of that bacteria too, how to make sure that bacteria is just not a morph of some bacteria that was on a previous probe that we sent that now has acclimated there and then did not originate there. So I think scientifically it's important to get out of the circular thinking of assuming if you find bacteria on another planet. I appreciate their caveat that did not originate on Earth.
So Judith, do you want to read from the next section? If you have the book handy.
Yeah.
Okay. The devil is the sum of the darkness of human nature.
Okay.
Page 432 at the bottom.
And is it when I still had a body, or is it after that?
It's
the devil is the son of the darkness of human nature.
It's a separate paragraph that's got a space between the paragraphs. And it begins, the devil.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay.
The devil is the sum of the darkness of human nature. He who lives in the light strives toward being the image of God. He who lives in the dark strives toward being the image of the devil. Because I wanted to live in the light, the sun went out for me when I touched the depths. It was dark and serpent-like. I united myself with it and did not overpower it. I took my part of the humiliation and subjugation upon myself. In that, I took on the nature of the serpent. If I had not become like the serpent, the devil, the quintessence of everything serpent-like, would have held this bit of power over me. This would have given the devil a grip, and he would have forced me to make a pact with him, just as he also cunningly deceived Faust. But I forestalled him by uniting myself with the serpent, just as a man unites with a woman. One more paragraph. So I took away from the devil the possibility of influence, which only ever passes through one's own serpenthood, which one commonly assigns to the devil instead of oneself. Mephistopheles is Satan, taken with my serpenthood. Satan himself is the quintessence of evil, naked and therefore without seduction, not even clever, but pure negation without convincing force. Thus I resisted his destructive influence and grasped him and fettered him firmly. His descendants served me, and I sacrificed them with the sword. Thus I built a firm structure. Through this, I myself gained stability and duration and could withstand the fluctuations of the personal. Therefore, the immortal in me is saved. Through drawing the darkness from my beyond over into the day, I emptied my beyond. Therefore, the demands of the dead disappeared as they were satisfied. Shall I keep going?
Yeah, sure.
I am no longer threatened by the dead, since I accepted their demands through accepting the serpent. But through this, I have also taken over something of the dead into my day. Yet it was necessary, since death is the most enduring of all things, that which can never be canceled out. Death gives me durability and solidity, so long as I wanted to satisfy only my own demands. I was personal and therefore living in the sense of the world. But when I recognized the demands of the dead in me and satisfied them, I gave up my earlier personal striving, and the world had to take me for a dead man. For a great cold comes over whoever, in the excess of his personal striving, has recognized the demands of the dead and seeks to satisfy them. While he feels as if a mysterious poison has paralyzed the living quality of his personal relations, the voices of the dead remain silent in his beyond. The threat, the fear, and the restlessness cease. For everything that previously lurked hungrily in him no longer lives with him in his day. His life is beautiful and rich, since he is himself. But whoever always wants only the fortune of others is ugly, since he cripples himself. A murderer is one who wants to force others to blessedness, since he kills his own growth. A fool is one who exterminates his love for the sake of love. Such a one is personal to the other. His beyond is gray and impersonal. He forces himself upon others. Therefore, he is cursed into forcing himself upon himself in a cold nothingness. He who has recognized the demands of the dead has banished his ugliness to the beyond. He no longer greedily forces himself upon others, but lives alone in beauty and speaks with the dead. But there comes the day when the demands of the dead and still perseveres, and beauty fades into the beyond, and the wasteland comes over onto this side. A black stage comes after the white, and heaven and hell are forever there. In the marginal note, I just want to say too, in the margin note, Jung says, I still did not realize that I myself was this murderer. Mm-hmm. So, but there comes the day when the demands of the dead are also satisfied. If one then still perseveres in solitude, beauty fades into the beyond and the wasteland comes over onto this side. A black stage comes after the white, and heaven and hell are forever there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
You attenuated and froze a little bit in the last two sentences.
Oh,
thanks for
okay.
reading.
Yeah.
It reminded me a little bit of what Jordan was speaking about before with you can't take other people's responsibility, you know. So if he was in fact the murderer in the First World War, well, he cannot be responsible for whether or not other people's souls go to heaven or to hell. That's not his job. His job is in the physical realm to be a soldier, right? So what he is experiencing is 100% between himself and his psyche, in my opinion.
Well, that's a good point, because a lot of people get all torn up and bent out of shape about all the sadness and all the travesty in the world, and they start to knot up, literally. And what's interesting is not their responsibility, and there, to me, it becomes kind of an avoidance of, well, don't be omissive, get in there and do something about it, instead of sitting back and saying it's all bad. And sure, but you take the good with the bad, find the treasure in the trouble. But I always just find it a little curious when people act like it's their emotion as the state of the world. And it could be legitimate. There could be a direct connection, like a Gaia mind, as it were. But oftentimes it just feels like it's somehow displacing their own life and not engaging. And Judith, I mean, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just a small anecdote, which is that I often in my life take a moment to just slow down and ask my death a question. Ask my death about this day, how it would guide me. I feel that quality of death for me takes me out of the personal, how are you feeling? Oh, do you need to go have a bubble bath? Kind of personalized living to a bit of a larger space of living. Yes, there is a person here alive and living and showing up at this morning. But I value that quality of death, and that quality of death as we experience it archetypally, because it is in the collective. I mean, Jung said these are the over and over repetitive experiences of living that is the archetype. We can't just like, oh, I think I'll not do that. I'll change that habit of evil. It's archetypally present in the collective.
You saying that reminds me, I don't know if this is accurate, but before Socrates took his life, didn't he offer a rooster to Asclepius? And then
he asked that a rooster be offered in the
and then
that was his last words.
He looked at death as a gift, and then penning a specific word, he looked at death as a cure. So I find that interesting, pathologically interesting, because I'm not going to take that cure as I'm going to jump on that. But at the same time, there's a lot in that word he specifically chose.
Yeah,
right.
I think there's an interesting phenomenon that goes on with me, between me and my students, okay? Because I've been asked on a number of occasions, people have asked me about my career. And one of the things that I say is that I built up a company on my back porch that I took public, or we took public, me and my partners. And that's a true statement. And they say, well, if that's true, why are you teaching school? As if, if you created a public company, that's all there is. You get all the toys, and that's all you need. And what I find is that I no longer fear death. Okay. In other words, if death is on the other side of this door in this room where I'm sitting, I'm ready. I'm okay with it. And I feel as if I've made a difference in life for a lot of people, and I have nothing more to prove either to myself or to anyone else. And so now I can go to this school for disobedient kids. I'm teaching in a public school, but it's a public school. It's an alternative school mostly for kids who've been suspended multiple times from their regular schools, and they're basically Peter Pan's lost boys. They're saying I won't grow up. And
Skip, are they all boys, or are there some girls too?
There are very few girls, but there are girls there. And so
my son made this oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and they all suffer from, almost all of them suffer from the resentment of being born Black. Okay, in other words, almost all of them are Black, and they resent it, and therefore they can fall into these unfortunate habits that people who are overtaken by evil happen to them, which is things like drug abuse. And I've had many of them say, "Oh, I just want to grow up and be a drug dealer." Yeah, right. And I look at that kid and say, in 5 years you're going to be dead. I don't say that, but I know it.
They're looking to the towers in their environment, though. So if I remove the judgy piece and look at that, water conforms to its cup, and they see power, and they see success, and they see someone who's actually navigating this chaos they live in a way that's to their own benefit. And so, in a sense, I get it. They'll be dead in 5 years, but at the same time, there are idols, there are mentors, just visually in their environment, which that's what they have to see. And if they can't see outside the environment, they can't realize the smallness of what's going on.
Well, yeah, and they live in an environment that sees white men like me as the enemy. And
well, primary example, when I taught martial arts to underprivileged kids in summers, the first thing we did on the first day is we planted a garden, just because I wanted to show quick fixes have shallow roots, and you're not going to yank up the seeds every 10 minutes to see if they've grown. You've got to leave them alone and nurture them. So there was a longer form piece across the whole summer. Well, when the carrots were ready to pick, I took them out there, and I pulled one onto the ground, and I took a bite. And I said, "Go ahead, have a carrot." And one guy goes, "That's dirty. Oh my God, that's dirty. It came out of the dirt." And I said, "Where do you think carrots come from?" And the answer I will never forget, because it changed my perspective on I need to inspect my expectations, because I had a huge blind spot. He said, "My brother works at the grocery store. They come from cardboard boxes in the back. I see him bring them out." That's where his world stops.
Yeah.
Ouch.
So understanding context, and don't read in and not think you think, and it should be this way or that. His world stopped at the cardboard box that generated carrots, and they were probably on aisle E6 in the back, whatever. But that's a huge clue to me to listen to context, and don't assume, say, what clients are going through or pathologically what's happening. Yeah. Because you may see something like that. The carrots come from cardboard boxes. My jaw hit the floor.
Yeah. Well, of course, of course, we all, to a degree, sublimate the fact that all life lives on other life, and
Right.
that everything that you might purchase at the grocery store to eat was once alive. Okay, everything. Okay, and Judith, you're muted, so we cannot hear you. You're still muted. Relax. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's a lot in this chunk of his writing. While he feels as if a mysterious poison has paralyzed the living quality of his personal relationships, the voices of the dead remain silent in his beyond. The threat, the fear, and the restlessness cease. And it says, for everything that previously lurked hungrily in him no longer lives with him in his day. His life is beautiful and rich since he is himself.
Yeah.
What do you think is the meaning of that? Since he is himself.
Well,
I think. Go ahead.
He realizes that he's the little boy holding the two snakes. Okay. And that he is holding the two snakes. He's got them. That's the way I interpret it.
I see that, and at the same time, Judith, I see our conversation before about the hair marking a moment where, I am me, and not in an explanatory way, the living way, where it's just being and resonance and living and action and feeling and eating, etc. But I'd say their life is beautiful and rich since they are themselves. We were talking about that before we even started, while we were waiting to get set up, and I think that's a big piece that goes with the little boy with the two snakes. I have the two, and then what we were talking about is then that the Hagia, the integration of the two actually in the one of self, so that they're both present. I mean, there's a history piece with the boy and the snakes, and then there's a living of the history and us with both at the same time.
And that's for me, what you're saying, the way that I'm interpreting the way that I interpret what you're saying is sort of like what comes to my mind is Zeus's father being so jealous, trying to eliminate him, but his mother protecting him, and then he grows up and he has to sort of live with this karma of well, now I'm jealous and now I know what my father did, but he never really acknowledges that in the mythology. He's always trying to be the superior one. So I'm not really sure if in a sense this superiority is this nature of human spiritualism, or if it's just like the reaction or the response of the universe based on man's actions for so much of man's demise, like this existential crises of needing and wanting and ego and everything that comes with existence.
So there's a comment here from someone who I can't read the name because I think it's maybe in Greek, but they say Jung seems to be wrestling in his soul, not projecting into ours. He is wearing all the hats to appraise the situation, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean that's.
I think very much.
Okay, so that's what the whole Red Book is about. So you might want to go back and start watching the beginning of the series.
Well, yeah, but I think to go with that comment that Jung said, people thinking is hard. That's why people judge. Thinking is hard, not because it's difficult, because of the solar system of the Cirque du Soleil level juggling of all of the hats and all of the people and parts under those hats. And then they change the hats. And the story comes to mind of the man with the black and white hat. And it's the master farmer and he's walking down the road, and his hat is black on this side and it's white on this side. And there are field workers over here, and there are field workers over here. And then there's this huge squabble. Someone said, that man's hat is black. And the guy on the other side said, oh no, I know it to be white. Well, they kill each other over this whole argument. And then someone else starts a squabble and they stop it. And they go to court. And the people who think the hat's black are sitting on this side. And the people who think the hat's white are sitting on this side. And the judge sees right down the middle, and the hat is black on one side and white on the other. And at one point, the farmer stands up and turns around and says, it's not that you're both right. It's that you both did not dig into each other's perspectives to understand. And so I think there's the man with the black and white hat piece of, don't believe everything you think, don't believe everything you see, because there may be something outside of that context that completely colors it in a more robust, or here, beautiful and rich way.
Okay, I want to read the next section.
Skip, can I share one more thing?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
sure.
since we're on the chat on the page of darkness and light. My son made this really cool picture. I'm so sorry to get so personal. My son made this really cool picture at school.
Yeah.
And
nice.
I'm not sure if it's because when he's traveling to Montenegro, or if it's because of my umbrella, which is like the sun and the moon. So I'm not sure, but I think it's the most beautiful thing. And I was so shocked when he said, Mommy, this is for you.
Oh,
and
you have to save that. You have to frame that.
I know. I'm looking for a
beautiful.
frame. It's too small. I mean, it's too big.
And I'm glad you said that, because it is exactly on the point of this next section. Okay.
Awesome.
And you're going to hear the answer.
I will listen. I'll be right back, but
Okay.
I'm listening.
Okay. Now that I had found the beauty in me and with myself, I spoke to my serpent. I look back as onto a work that has been accomplished. Serpent, nothing is accomplished yet. What do you mean? Not accomplished? Serpent, this is only the beginning. I think you are lying. Serpent, whom are you quarreling with? Do you know better? I know nothing, but I'd already gotten used to the idea that we had reached a goal, at least a temporary one. If even the dead are about to become extinct, what else is going to happen? Serpent, but then the living must first begin to live. This remark could certainly be deeply meaningful, but it seems to be nothing but a joke. Serpent, you are getting impertinent. I'm not joking. Life has yet to begin. What do you mean by life? Serpent, I say life has yet to begin. Didn't you feel empty today? Do you call that life? What you say is true, but I try to put as good a face on it as I can on everything, and to settle for things. Serpent, that might be quite comfortable, but you really ought to make much higher demands. That I dread. I will certainly not assume that I could satisfy my own demands, but neither do I think that you are capable of satisfying them. However, it might be that once again, I'm not trusting you enough. I suppose that might be so because I've drawn closer to you in human terms and find you so urbane. Serpent, that proves nothing. Just don't assume that someone you could ever grasp me, that somehow you could ever grasp me and embody me. So what would it be? I'm ready. You are entitled to a reward. This is the serpent. You are entitled to a reward. What has been accomplished so far? A sweet thought. That payment could be made for this. Serpent, I give you payment in images. Behold. Okay, so we just saw Amela, and she was paid in images and an image from her child, and I think
poignant from her son, because I give you payment in images. Behold, images are generative. So that's the everlasting life piece again. Right. That which is created creates more life, and the images never stop. So I mean that, and just think about that picture, that piece of art that he made framed. It takes on another life, and it gets a reverence where it's hung in the home. Again, behold.
Right.
Okay. The gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. So I think that we should stop here, because the next section, which is about Elijah and Salome, is an important one. And if we continue, we're gonna go way over, and so I think we should take that up next week.
I agree. It's chapter.
But I do want to talk to Mela if she's still there, or Judith, if you have comments about payment in images, because that's an important Jungian concept.
Well, they are unlimited, whereas words and our left brain is much more linear and limited, and images, and even as Jordan's saying, they're generative. They keep on giving endlessly. I mean, the caves paintings in Lascaux are still giving.
Absolutely. And Edward Edinger made an interesting comment about Jungian writing, because Carl Jung is not easy for everybody to read. We're taught to write something with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and with paragraphs, and each paragraph has one meaning. And then we go on and change the paragraph and have another meaning, right? That's how we're taught in grammar, but that's not how Jung writes. Jung writes as Edinger says, it's like receiving a cheese ball at Christmas. And you bite into it, and sometimes you get a nut, and sometimes you get a cranberry or what have you in that cheese ball. And the point is that Jung regards each paragraph as a complete image. So I can say something about something right now, and as soon as I say it, everyone will know exactly what I'm talking about, probably from beginning to end. You may not remember it all, but it is one image. And you can immediately see what I'm talking about, which is that each paragraph of Jung's is a complete image of one of his concepts. And so I'll just give you the example. The example is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Now, as soon as I say that, all kinds of things rush into your head. You know how it begins. You probably know how it ends. You've probably been in a concert hall where it's been played, and all sorts of memories flow back about Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Everybody's heard it, or at least everybody in the Western world has. And in fact, all of Beethoven's symphonies are like that. Some better known than others. The other one that's very well known is the Ninth Symphony, the Chorale Symphony. Which is sometimes called Ode to Joy. and handles messiahs like that too. I mean, they are one cheese ball. Okay. And so basically what Jung's paragraphs are like those symphonies, or they're one image that he wants to convey. So he's not talking linearly about, okay, here's how Beethoven symphony goes, and here's the notes that you have to play, and all, you know, he's not explaining it. He's just giving you the cheese ball, and then it's up to you to work it out, what it means. And so that's his payment. So he says, I give you payment in images. Behold, that's the serpent talking, but that's what Jung means. I mean, this was Edinger's point, that we think in images. We think in images. That's a big concept that I've been thinking about for decades now. We think in images. We don't think linearly. And what Jung's writing is about is thinking in images. So when you read some of the paragraphs in Answer to Job, for example, are 2.5 pages long, right? And the whole point is, if you're going to read Jung, you really have to take it one paragraph at a time and grok what he's talking about in that thing. It's like hearing Beethoven's Fifth for the first time. You know, you hear it, but you haven't. I mean, you got the first 4 notes maybe, but you haven't closed your eyes and just let the symphony wash over you and have a meaning to you. Okay. And, you know, obviously Beethoven and Handel still live, very much so, because of what they put into their music. And
well, I think to enliven no, that's, I love that. I'm gonna piggyback right on the Beethoven's Fifth, and also the cheese ball, because how do you approach the cheese ball? Season to season, year to year. And Beethoven's Fifth is still very much alive, because Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple, the famous song Smoke on the Water, is the intro to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony played backwards. Mm-hmm. And in an interview, Ritchie Blackmore said, well, if he ever comes back, I owe him a lot of money. But it's so Beethoven, he basically literally ripped it, played it backwards, totally different character. But then that's, how do you approach the cheese ball?
Yeah, and you know, I've been observing for whatever number of years it's been published, 14 years, that you can read the Red Book backward, sentence by sentence, and it'll mean exactly the same thing. Okay. You can just, and I actually proved this, because when I was first on Twitter and I was trying to think of something to do on Twitter, I decided, well, you know, nothing would be better than to put the Red Book onto Twitter, because people were putting the Bible onto Twitter. And so what I found out was that in order to do that, in order for it to read front to back, you have to enter it back to front. So each sentence that is a tweet has to be put in before the one before it, if you will. Okay. In other words, think about how Twitter works. You know, just when you're putting it up, you won't see it, but once it's up there and other people are reading it, a paragraph has to be entered backward. And what I found out is it makes absolutely the same amount of sense, regardless of which direction you read it, if you read it sentence by sentence backward. And
it's like looking at a rock or geologic inclusion set. in a pyroclastic flow. It doesn't matter which way you approach it, it's still the same rock. But you start anywhere and the minerals are all there. And I mean, Jung is like Numite. It's like the oldest mineral. Almost every other thing is in Numite, only found in spotty parts of your neck of the woods, Maryland, and primarily Greenland. But it's 4 billion years old. And
so you think about a cheese ball. Okay, you might see a cheese ball in every holiday or every Christmas holiday if you're Christian, anyway. And when you see it, you can start to salivate without ever knowing what that cheese ball in front of you it tastes like, because you're gonna slice off a little bit of it and put it on a cracker, and it's going to taste pretty good. Type thing.
Unlike a fruitcake, where instead of salivating, you're like, which closet is the other rewrapping paper in?
Yeah. So if ever you don't understand Jung, the best thing to do is to start reading it backwards, sentence by sentence.
That's amazing, Skip. I mean, that is really helpful to go into, how much he had liberated himself from the linear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Judith, I know you were, when we first started to converse, you were having trouble getting into the Red Book. And I think that this may be sort of a epiphany moment here for you.
It is. And thank you. And because it has still been a challenge, I've just softened around the whole having to know and taking more of it as experience. And this is another stepping stone into it, Skip. I feel that you've just given here. Thank you very much.
Right. You're welcome.
I'll add, Judith, that when I got to look at all these cool rocks, which one am I going to pick up? Because they were all heaven, in your hand. I realized, why don't I I Ching the book? I'm just going to open it up, whatever paragraph I see, that's the paragraph I'm gonna, and it works just the same. So it's like there are these whole little universes in each paragraph, instead of the more and more and more of the same told differently. And but that's fun to me too, to play it where just open it up, I Ching the book.
That's lovely. That's helpful too. I appreciate it.
Yeah, kind of morning missive, Oh, I don't want that one today.
Hey, Skip. So about my son's picture, I was a little bit concerned because I thought that maybe I'm sort of, I don't know, maybe I'm putting a little too much into my son's brain or something from our traditions and cultures and my mother's mysticism and all this stuff. So I was a little bit concerned at first, and I thought to myself, oh my God. But at the same time, the principal at his public school, she and her staff have every month they have something called Spirit Day. And I asked him, what does this mean, Spirit Day? And he said to me, oh, it's just, getting into the school spirit. And I made such a big deal about it. I said, well, you have to be careful because your ancestors from the Iberian Peninsula were executed and tortured to death specifically because of spiritual reasons. So be careful, okay? And he's like, yes, mommy, I know. I'm not a Latino, I'm a Ladino. And I said, yes, that's right. So I don't know if I'm brainwashing him or whatever, but I too am learning. I'm learning about womanhood. I'm learning about motherhood. And something that I'm learning as well is that sometimes people can also walk into my sunlight from the darkness or into my darkness with the sunlight and disrupt my mandala or my sacred geometry with, something as simple as emotion. And for myself, all of these symbols have some kind of emotions attached to it. And my only fear is that I am not scaring my son, or I'm not excluding him too much or highlighting him too much in the group of other children and, regular children's ideas and thoughts. But if I could have one thing as a parent, is for my son to, of course, be confident, but also to know who he is and where his ancestry is from. Just as long as he knows who he is, so that way when he grows up to become a man in his journey of manhood, that he's aware of, well, I know my identity. My mother sort of gave me the information and the tools to navigate the path of manhood for myself. And so he can, begin with this stencil and canvas that I've provided him. And if he needs a larger canvas, or if he needs to use the floor for his canvas, he can. But I felt so many different emotions when I saw his picture. And I'm just scared. I'm scared.
Well, okay.
It scared me.
So let me react to that. I'm going to react to it with showing you an image that I have done completed in the last week. And what I would say about your son is these things were already in him. Okay. These things were already in him. I say it again. You're not putting them in him. They were already there. And you, in terms of raising your son, you just have to do the best you can every time. That's all. You don't have to worry about it. You just, of all the options, you pick the best at any given moment, whatever that may be. So, what I've been trying to take pictures of my psyche, okay? And I've been doing that. Judith knows that I've been doing it with Rockies and with doodling and so on for quite some time, but I've been especially doing it with Rockies since last April when Colleen introduced that skill to me. But I also have done it with doodles, and so I recently did a doodle, which I showed Colleen yesterday, and she was amazed and looked at it. And so it contains the map of the soul as Colleen has described it, and as Murray Stein has described it. And so I'm going to share this image that I did completed in the last week. It took I would say it took maybe as much as 3 weeks to complete this piece, which is 11 by 14. And it bears my mark of the soul. And so one of the rules about doodling is you should not try to copy me, meaning the way I do things. Okay. But anyway, so anyway, this was the doodle I came up with. Then I poured water over it as an experiment, and this is what happened. It became very dull. And so now I have to rework it. And I
that's the journey, Chip. That's the Skip, that's the journey of the soul.
right. And so yeah, and that's the journey of the soul. In other words, it has to be reworked until I'm satisfied with it. I wasn't satisfied with it at this point, but even though I liked it, and even though Colleen likes it, I'm still not satisfied with it. And it's called Bright Future. And can anybody see the functional thing that's in this picture that made me think of that title? Okay, well, I've stumped the stars now, so let me first say that the Dalai Lama has said that in his next incarnation, he's going to be born as a blonde California girl, quote unquote. Okay, and so what I saw in this was this shape, which reminded me of a cheek of a girl looking away from me with her blonde hair. And in terms of the map of the soul here, let me talk you through it. In the lower left corner is the creative wellspring is represented in that corner. Above it is dreams and visions, and you can see how my dreams and visions quadrant is reaching down into the creative wellspring to bring things up. And then the upper right represents your mission, today's mission, what your mission is, and the lower right, and the right side represents the future, the left side represents the past, the lower right represents what you're doing about it today. This part right here, the blue part here, which can be larger, represents a blockage, because these energies are constantly moving around within us. So in my style, I've created pipelines for the energies, of course. And this upper central part here represents ideals, the ideals. And so I'm more preferring the Rocky approach, because I find that knowing this map of the soul and knowing those rules, I find too constricting in terms of reading my own unconscious. And I'll show you one other piece that I've done even more recently, and this is called Stopping the Red. And Colleen's comment is that the blue is intelligence controlling the red, stopping the red. And of course, the purple is the combination of red and blue.
Skip, was this a doodle?
Yes.
With your non-dominant hand? Did you do it with your non-dominant hand?
No, I haven't I haven't tried that. I should try that.
Pretty interesting. It's sort of a combination of doodling, I think, and Rocky, because when you do your non-dominant hand and you do sort of a doodle scribble, and then you just stop and you gaze, and then you pull out what wants to come forward.
Yeah. Okay, well,
but this is wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, what Colleen says is what you get, and not referring to the non-dominant hand issue,
right?
And is what you get is a mark of the self. Okay, so in terms of a mark of the self, what this represents to me is that I'm male, and therefore I'm trying to apply rules to what I'm doing, and so my rules are that, you know, the colors have to change, and I can't cross over any line unless there's two lines, and then I can cross under. So you see that, for example, in this red, where this red is passing under both the yellow and the blue here, and headed up into this area here. and so and so
Skip, can you say your rules again? They're wonderful.
Oh, I think you're froze, Skip.
Yeah, what I was saying is I probably can't follow the non-dominant hand, but by making these sort of semi-parallel lines. I did it more in this one, but it was
right.
So I do regard this as in terms of doodling my mark of the self, and it's interesting in terms of the map of the soul as described by Colleen and Mary Stein. But anyway.
Well, I'd like to say to Amela too, I think you're properly brainwashing your son, where you're washing his brain by keeping it full of fuel of ideas to keep it moving instead of stagnant and waiting around for someone to tell him what to do.
Yeah.
He'll have enough experiences that he'll go, no, that's not me. Oh, that resonates. Definitely, that's not a priority.
Yeah.
And by you continuing to have him cycle through the experiences of these images and the lineage, and we all buck parts of our lineage. Part of it doesn't work for us anymore. But the thing is, what happens is that enhances the legacy of the lineage because each and every person building on the previous evolve it forward. And so it doesn't have to be static rules. I think you're being a wonderful parent. I don't know how many kids don't have anything from their parents, much less the right or the wrong stuff. The fact that you're engaging with him to get himself to engage himself, that's parenting, and you're showing him your way, but then it doesn't have to do it your way. But there are ways to be careful to make sure that your identity is still yours. So I commend you for what you're doing.
I'd like to add to that and thank Amela for sharing her son's artwork, because that's really raw and personal and lovely. And kids' art is deep and profound and unfiltered. And I think parenting from an unfiltered place is probably the best we can do as well, without over giving the information, responding to his questions and his curiosities and his discoveries, and validating his journey, and giving him the acknowledgement that that his beautiful soul is deserving of and merits with just by being here. Rarely as parents can we predict the mistakes that our children will accuse us of later in life. I guarantee you that the things that you worry about probably will never end up on his list, and he may or may not ever share that list in future years. So I would encourage you to trust your beautiful soul, and it will guide you and let you know by instinct and niggles and twinges in your nervous system when you've gone maybe off the path of your genuine expression as a mother. And you can always backtrack. You can always go down the trail again and ask your son if you can revisit issues and conversations. You can always cop to your mistakes. You can always apologize. You can always ask him what he thinks of things and how does he feel about it, and just go with that half of the conversation without inserting too much, of yourself, which I think is what we worry about. Am I imprinting too much? Am I not giving them enough information? The world is a vast place. He needs you. But he needs you at his pace.
Yeah.
And I think that the worries that may be warranting, anything, you'll feel that, Amela. You're a genius.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that because it says that don't put the letter S in front of mother, so it's not smother.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of comments here on YouTube that are worth mentioning. Richard talks about pray the rosary, it allows you safe passage on the journey. And praying the rosary is a mantra, like as used in Buddhism as well. And they, they are mind protectors. Okay, they do protect the mind, and so they don't allow for the randomness of my doodles or my Rockies. And but they are very useful for mental health. There's no doubt about that, of course. And so I confirm that. But then there's an individual here who identifies as, once they named me, I wasn't. And okay, that's an interesting thought. I think that from what he said here, he or she said, it sounds to me like possibly like a therapist. And I just want to read what has been said. Skip, that picture is tremendous. Reminds me of the painting The Nightmare Artist. and of course, all of us have, that soup in our psyche. There are no picture galleries in our psyche. It's if we name it, it goes away type thing. And so then they go on to say, fascinating, Judith, non-dominance practice too often becomes dominance. Rules needed about non-dominance, a very careful tightrope walk. And so that suggests to me someone who's well-read, who understands what Nietzsche was talking about in Thus Spake Zarathustra, when he talked about the tightrope walker and the tightrope walker who fell to his death at the beginning of Thus Spake Zarathustra. And of course, when you go to non-dominance, you introduce random, you introduce the right brain, typically, because most of us are right-handed, and so we're normally going to the left brain. And so if you're right-handed and you're using non-dominance, now you're going to the right brain, which is the irrational part of the brain. And so it's interesting. I don't know, I'd love to hear what Judith says about that, but you're muted, Judith. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, anything can become a routine, right? And then we stop being present. So I appreciate the YouTube comment. If it's just a go-to and we're not sort of slowing down or slowing in with our presence, and again, checking that, just that you brought that into the discussion opens it up for all of us. But I do feel going with what isn't so deeply grooved as dominant can be helpful in creative expression. And to me, getting closer to maybe where Jung has a dwelling place for all of us.
Yeah, I love that. I think that the non-dominant, I think the non-dominant also is more pure. It has been less affected by the rituals of teaching. It's still more yours. And I mean, switch hitters in baseball, switch pitchers, and personally from martial arts, switch stance. And I remember, oh my God, I'm coming from the left. This is clumsy. And I realized, no, it was stronger. It was slower. It just had less higher motor skill function. But to start doing the non-dominant, it started with, I'm going to start brushing my teeth with my left hand. And you start to realize how clunky just that simple little thing. And when I started getting good at brushing my teeth with the left hand, I noticed that all the other techniques started to fall in line. And the left side was like, oh, we have attention now. We get how to go this way.
Yeah.
Equanimity is a moving target.
And
Yeah.
Judith, you're quite right that Jung, from the beginning, I mean, the first 2 paragraphs of the Red Book say that Jung put aside all his logic. He had to put aside all of his logic to do this. And, you know, this rationality. And so, you know, he's literally saying, you know, that you have to go with the irrational in order to learn some things. And, you know, although I didn't understand what he was doing for the longest time in my reading, something about it attracted me. Okay. So, and it was, and I'm sure it was the irrational. In other words, just my reading in Jung over now 36 years is it was something I felt I needed. I didn't know what it was, but I felt that I needed. And now that I've sort of grokked it and put it into my individuation, not completely, I could never say that, but it just has become a part of me now. You know, I see that, you know, that has value, and you know, what Jordan's saying about the toothbrushing, or you know, you're saying about doing doodles left-handed. I'm going to try that. It's going to be interesting to do an experiment.
For me, it looks like sort of like waves of some kind of symphony that you've made, you know. So I don't know if maybe this is your mind-body connection all together as one big gumbo.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you know, just releasing some.
Yeah, my problem with some things is that,
or unlocking.
I turn away. I've turned away from some things. Like I worked on art for 10 years, and then I did 3 shows in 2005, and once I did those 3 shows, I had no urge to do art again. And, you know, I'd gotten to the point where I could do portraits of people. And what I found was I kept painting their shadow. and therefore they didn't like the picture that they saw. Okay. And you know, when, you know, ultimately I understood that that's what I was doing. And so, I mean, I'll give you one example here, which is I could paint a portrait, but I would show the shadow here. And here it is. It's a self-portrait that I did. This is me in Operation Imperial Lake in Vietnam in 1970. And I did this from a picture of myself. But what I got is I got my shadow. And it has everything I have to say about the Vietnam War in the white of my left eye. I guess I'll show you that one more time since I said that. Okay, so everything I have to say about the Vietnam War is contained in the white of my left eye in this image. And you can see it very clearly.
I'm glad you brought this up, because I have not been able to unsee that image when you show us that 4-quadrant doodle, and then the white in that left eye. is
Yeah.
on the left side and your right eye in the doodle. But there's this, I can see that man looking out through that doodle so clearly since the first time you popped it up. When you popped it up, I went, that's not what that painting looks like. I mean, it literally was that much of the same. So I would be curious to see them side by side at some point to just see.
That'd be interesting. Yeah. Okay, so we're
Skip.
yeah.
Judith had something to say. Sorry.
Yeah, go
No,
ahead, Judith.
I just have to go. I really appreciate it. And are you saying that the white in your left eye was like it? To me, it shows the piercing pain.
Oh yeah.
But that's my interpretation. When you see that, is that the shadow that you didn't want to see when you were a young soldier in Vietnam?
I was a Marine.
There's your shadow saying, look at this powerful experience.
I mean, I painted this in 1991, I think. So it was 20 years later. And the day after this picture was taken was the day I got closest to death in Vietnam. You know, I think that's an interesting fact, but I captured it in that one brushstroke. Okay. And I didn't do that consciously. Okay, I wasn't intentionally doing that. But every time I look at that portrait, that's what I think. You know, people have asked me, you know, many times over the years whether, you know, to tell them about Vietnam, and I say, I show that image, I said, that's all I have to say about it. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to say anything more.
Right.
And people get what I mean. I mean, interestingly, I wore my uniform to school a few weeks ago, and I'll show you a picture of that. Okay, this is a picture of me with my let's see, where's my, I have to get to back to my share screen thing here. Okay, share screen. Okay, so I wore my uniform and I had a couple of kids. This
wow.
Is me.
Oh, sorry, that was loud.
This is me with my my principal at my school, and I did it intentionally. It was the birthday of the Marine Corps, which was my reason or my excuse for doing it. But I wanted to change the perception of my students toward me, okay, because they think of me as an old, washed up yo-yo, basically, that they don't want to think about. And, you know, a couple of them kept denying that I was ever a Marine. Okay, they just kept trying to offend me by saying, you were never a Marine, you're not a Marine. And of course, in the Marine Corps, we say, once a Marine, always a Marine. And
Semper Fi.
Right, thank you, Semper Fi. And so the point that I'm trying to make here is that those children were trying to deny that I could be that, you know, because it just seems like a bridge too far for them. And so their only way of coping is to deny that I ever did it. Right.
I think they're playing with you, Skip. They want to see how you're going to respond. And if you have this not that you don't have discipline or diligence, you obviously do, but respectively, but that's what they would like to see, because you know, the way that you were describing the characteristics of the neighborhood, and you know, the challenges of societal issues, and all these structure systemic problems, um you know, this is the response. Like, how are you going to respond if I tell you, no, you're not? You know, no,
Well,
you're not. That's
yeah.
not who you are.
But I feel, Skip, you brought in some of their archetypes are so unconscious. You consciously brought in a warrior archetype.
Right.
You walked it in.
Yeah.
And it speaks so much.
Oh yeah. No,
And it wasn't just a Halloween costume. You know, you were expressing yourself that way. I honor that so much. And I think it has an impact in their psyche, even though what Amela's saying is like, yeah, on the outer level, you know, they're going to screw with your authority or put you in a box of older person box. I get put in that box too.
Yeah.
And it's so great to just have a little bit of bright light that you bring in that shatters the box. Whether they get it or not, they are getting it. I really appreciate your courage.
Yeah. It's interesting, but you know, I think the principles, there are three principles, and I think they appreciated it. And I did it with their permission, of course. And so anyway, okay, we have gone a half hour over anyway, even though I tried to end early. So
I think this whole session's made me numinous, because watch, my brain's starting to glow.
Thank you, Judah.
Thanks, everybody.
Whoa.
Can I share one more thing before you leave, Skip?
Amela, yes, you
yes,
you can.
I have this photograph of Jesus, and I had no idea that there's a little shadow behind him, which is obviously the tree. But for some reason, when I have this picture up, I have yet to find a perfect frame for it. But it's so strange, because especially in the nighttime, I look and I can't see Christ. I look at the shadow and I'm like, what is that shadow there? It's so strange to me why my mind is saying focus on the shadow instead of this obvious white figure that's popping out. You know, I'm so focused into that, you know, multi-dimensional lighting that's creating this space. And I don't know why, but I'm gonna have to talk to my therapist about it.
Well, actually, no, it's interesting. You're seeing, not looking. And so what's interesting is even your therapist can say lots of stuff, but I would say no words. I would inhabit the fact that you are seeing that, not just looking at what you're supposed to see. And because you're seeing it, it's correct. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, intuitively, actionably, and just let it be. And there's no right or wrong about it. You don't need to, oh, what do I need to heal? It's no, look, I'm seeing what's unseen. I'm seeing the shadow that's supporting the other thing. So I think you're naturally seeing rather than looking. And before you go to your therapist, I would suggest to give yourself more credit that look what I capital S see, and do that and play with it without words. Just dance with it.
Yeah. And well, I'll just give you the benefit of my experience of seeing something in the dark, which was I asked Tim Holmes to do my portrait one time, and well, actually 2 times now, gonna be 3. And the first one he did, when I first looked at it, I didn't really like it. I didn't know why. But that night I walked past it in the dark with just night lights on. And first of all, I saw it 3-dimensional with just night lights on. And And of course, as a portrait image will do, the face followed me across the room. And from that point on, that portrait started to gain numinosity for me. And of course, now it has huge numinosity because we looked for things in it, Jungian things in it, in one of our advanced reading groups one day. And we found about 125. You know, I had seen things in it which Tim hadn't seen. And I came up with about 55 things, but then I did it in the group and we came up with another 70 things beyond the ones I had seen. And so it was quite a numinous experience, and I'll never forget that now. Right.
Really.
Okay, so
Thanks for today.
Yep. Thanks everybody for being here. It's been
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Skip.
interesting. And we never know where we're going to end up, but that was an interesting session. I hope everyone enjoyed it. So see you again. See you next week. We'll start with